if we don't stop them.
This is not just a fight for the United States of America. This is a fight for civilization itself.
It's everything Karl Marx dreamed of before our very eyes.
I think they've pushed us over the cliff in ever since. America isn't going to fall. We are falling.
We are in a dependent state, and when you go to the voting booth, you get to vote your self-interest. So, real issue, a real concern when you don't have a voting base with some skin in the game, as much to lose as to gain. What we know from history is that when you tip the scale at 51%, now you are talking about a license to steal. You're talking about that 51% tyranny that de Tocqueville was so concerned about. The democracy, for all its benefits, the main challenge is you get to the point where you have a 51% tyranny.
I think that it's underappreciated in our society just how extensive the damage of the welfare state is. And I think that when you look into the heart of the liberal and what they do to our society in the name of social justice or in the name of equality, it's evil will.
When a government is working as hard as possible to create dependency in their citizens, you know that their real aim is to eliminate freedom, because no man is truly free that is unable to provide for himself.
The dollar in America today, it takes 98 of them to buy what $1 did in 1913 when the Federal Reserve System was enacted into law. That is theft.
The fifth plank of the Communist Manifesto is to create a central bank. Ours was created in 1913 and is called the Federal Reserve.
You say Federal Reserve, and I think most Americans think that's part of the government. But of course, the Federal Reserve Bank isn't part of the government. The Federal Reserve is a private bank.
It's not a government institution. It's as Federal Express.
I'm sure the individuals involved would fit nicely into my chart if we knew their names, but we have allowed them to remain anonymous. They also tell us we do not have the authority to audit them to see how much of our money they have printed, even though with each bill they print, inflation soars. At the current rate of inflation, which most think is very modest, things go up in price 10 times every 50 years. My grandfather bought a nice house in 1915 for $4,500. My father bought a nice house in 1965 for $45,000. And my house today is $450,000. So if the rates of inflation just stay like they are, my grandson's house will cost him $4.5 million, and his grandson's $45 million.
Inflation is a tax. It's a hidden tax. And so it steals from people who have saved. When they finally retire at the end of a lifespan, all this money that they put aside doesn't buy anything anymore.
Houses haven't gotten more expensive. The dollar has just lost 97% of its value over the last 100 years. 1 ounce of gold would buy 300 loaves of bread 2,000 years ago, and 1 ounce of gold today will buy 300 loaves of bread. Prices rarely change. What's happened is the Federal Reserve has been quietly stealing our wealth while we believe their lie that inflation is normal. It wasn't normal for the first 6,000 years of Earth history. It magically started in America in 1913. Our economic system today is based on Keynesian economics. John Maynard Keynes is the father of it. If there is any doubt to the purposefulness of our economic situation, listen to this. He said, quote, By a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate secretly and unobserved an important part of the wealth of their citizens. Lenin was certainly right. There is no subtler, no surer means of overturning the existing basis of society than to debauch its currency. The process engages all the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction, and it does it in a manner which not one man in a million is able to diagnose, unquote. The second plank of the Communist Manifesto is to implement a graduated income tax. Ours was placed into law in 1914.
If you establish a tax that is based on the government's power to determine what percentage of your income it's going to take away from you, how much of your income does it control? Well, that means the government controls 100% of your income. If that is the situation, you are no longer a free person. You are a slave, and you live on an allowance from your government.
When Ronald Reagan came into office, the top tax rate was 70%. When he left office, he had cut it down to 27%. During that same time, revenue to the government doubled. The lie of the left is that increasing taxes on the rich will help stimulate the economy, and nothing could be further from the truth. It's all a strategic part of the plan to create more dependency. People wonder why our free enterprise system isn't working anymore. It's because the inflation, taxation, and regulation is effectively killing its productivity and its ability to create wealth. So now people talk about redistributing the wealth we have instead of creating more. Every single person in the world could be a millionaire. Wealth is created by hard work, creativity, and ingenuity. The lie that it's a fixed pie is perpetrated by those that seek to pit the have-nots against the haves. If you add up all the debts and obligations our government has placed on us, every single individual owes over $650,000, which obviously isn't ever going to be paid back.
That's the nature of bankruptcy. And as one writer used to say, how did you go bankrupt? Well, very slowly, and then all at once.
You go back to the fall of the Soviet Union. Suddenly, if you were from that side of things, from the communist side of things, you're looking at the world, and there's only one superpower left, and it's the United States of America. It is the only nation on earth that is built on the ideals of limited government, free enterprise, individual liberty, private property rights. So now you've got this one superpower that is completely opposed to everything you believe in. What do? Well, the word came down to harmonize the United States into the rest of the world. You know, what would get us to do that? What would get us to throw our liberties on the bonfire like a good old-fashioned book burning? Environmental Armageddon became the choice. You've got to save the planet. And that became the mantra. And Americans bought it hook, line, and sinker. The environmental movement became the most popular movement in the country, and people were willing to be led in any direction if it meant protecting the environment. And that's pretty much how we got there.
We have to do something, they say, because we're destroying the planet, the Earth has a fever, we have to do something. And that, if it were true, would be a legitimate argument, right? But if you're screaming fire in a crowded theater, then it's a wicked argument to make when there's no fire at all. You're just trying to move people.
There are three core claims that are propping up the entire movement.
In Michigan, they've done some wonderful studies at the university level illustrating the fact that when you increase carbon dioxide, plant life grows wildly.
If you Google optimum CO2 concentration for plant growth, those plants, which all life depends on as their food source, you will find that it is 4 times the present level.
You can go back to the era here on planet Earth. Levels of carbon dioxide were probably 6 to maybe 12 times higher than today.
We're not at a high point now. We're at a low point.
Foliage was all over the planet.
Carbon pollution is now a common term that people are using, when in fact, if CO2 fell below 150 parts per million in the global atmosphere, all the plants would die. And then what would we eat? There wouldn't be anything left to eat but rocks at that point. Frost and ice are the enemy of life. You come from the tropics into the temperate zone and then the Arctic, you lose 99% of species biodiversity.
Which means that quite the opposite of what the alarmists say, global warming won't lead to more extinctions. It will lead to protecting more species from extinctions.
Over 115 different countries and territories are dying off by not having the 2.1 children per woman that is necessary for a country to survive. Population has increased in recent years because of modern medicine, and our environment has become so much cleaner. The world could easily handle 100 billion people, but it will never even reach 10 billion. As soon as this generation of elderly start dying off, population will decline for as far as the demographer's eye can see.
You know, you could move the entire population of the globe to the state of Texas, use 1/3 of it for living space, 1/3 for factories and workplaces, and another 1/3 for recreation, and you could leave the entire rest of the world completely uninhabited.
You don't have to dig very deep into the key people and groups involved for it to become crystal clear why they continue to promote these lies.
Karl Marx really got the entire modern environmental movement rolling. It's well documented. In fact, you can go back to 1883, a paper that was written by Frederick Engels and Karl Marx, Dialectics of Nature. They talk about global cooling. They were trying to scare people into believing that mankind's pollution was going to put the Earth into a free fall temperature-wise, and there would be no life whatsoever. Ray Lankester studies at the feet of Karl Marx and comes up with a saying that is really, I mean, it's at the heart of the environmental movement today. Humans are the insurgent sons of nature. Interestingly, Ray Lankester had a disciple who was named Arthur Tainsley. Arthur Tainsley coined the term ecology. The word ecology was essentially fashioned by a disciple of Karl Marx.
And it keeps going. Earth Day is celebrated on April 22nd each year because that was Vladimir Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union's birthday. And Gus Hall, who wrote the book Ecology that helped get the movement rolling, was the head of the Communist Party USA.
The modern engine of the environmental movement is the United Nations.
You have to remember, the United Nations Charter was written by Alger Hiss, one of the most notorious Soviet spies working in the FDR administration. People don't know that.
When my friend was training in Moscow, the Soviets were openly telling all of their students from all over the world, the United Nations is our thing. We own it. This is our instrument for policy. This is our baby.
Maurice Strong has headed up the entire environmental program of the United Nations for decades and is the father of Agenda 21. He said, quote, Agenda 21 is a blueprint for constructing the new world order. It is vital people grasp this, unquote. He picked Gro Harlem Brundtland to write out the world's environmental agenda in a document titled Our Common Future, which is where the term sustainable development was used for the first time. Guess who she was? The former vice president of the World Socialist Party, the group that Karl Marx himself started. The icing on the cake is the next player I came across, Mikhail Gorbachev, the murderous communist dictator. Guess what he did immediately upon stepping down from the Soviet Union? He started an environmental group, Green Cross International.
You mentioned Gorbachev. He has no problem at all switching gears from the Soviet destroyer of the environment, come to America, he's the savior of the environment. But what's he promoting? Bigger government, more control, more power to the United Nations, less individual freedom, all of the agenda of collectivism. He's doing exactly the same thing in San Francisco that he was doing in Moscow.
And he isn't just some fringe player. He is one of the leaders. When I found out that the Earth Charter, which is supposed to be the new 10 Commandments for the 21st century, was written by Mr. Gorbachev, it was clear. Environmentalism isn't just like communism. It is communism. You couldn't make this stuff up.
A lot of the people in the peace movement were in fact more pro-Russia and anti-American than anything. And they brought their neo-Marxism with them into the environmental movement, pushing it to the extreme left of the political spectrum. Greenpeace and their allies and a whole bunch of other fellow travelers have adopted these agendas, which actually, if they were brought into effect, would cause more damage to people and the environment than if we just went about our sort of conventional way that we're on now.
In 1995, the Marxists, Democratic Socialists of America, 7,000 members, Gramsciist communists, they believe in revolution through infiltration, they took over the AFL-CIO. They took over the American Labour Movement, and they put their member, John Sweeney, in as president. And now their protege, Richard Trumka, runs it for them. What they did, they then took over every single major labour union in the country, and that leverage enabled them to take over the Democratic Party. Because there's hardly a Democrat at any level in this country, from county commission to federal, who doesn't owe his job to the unions for money, for manpower, for get out the vote, even for vote fraud. They mounted a purge at the higher levels of all the Southern Dixiecrats, the conservative Democrats, the moderate Democrats, and now the Marxists, through the unions, have completely taken over the higher reaches of the Democratic Party. So you've got 20,000 card-carrying communists in your country are dictating the policies of the Democratic Party, which is controlling the lives of 300 million Americans.
If this is hard to believe, I encourage you to go to the Communist Party USA's People's World or the Democratic Socialists of America's Democratic Left, and you will see every single issue they are promoting today will be the exact issues the Democrats will be putting on the floor of Congress tomorrow.
And you've got all these loyal Democrats out there, good patriotic people, who still think they're voting for Harry Truman and JFK. Look, by the standards of today, do you think Harry Truman or JFK would have a chance in today's Democratic Party? Those guys today would probably be in the Tea Party. Yet their party is now run by communists, and all these loyal Democrats all over this country are still voting on party lines and basically voting for Marxists and anti-Americans because they do not understand their party has been taken over.
It's no longer just an opposing party with different views. It is our enemy working as fast and furious as they can to finish the quiet revolution that started over 100 years ago. And that is why every issue is being used against us as a weapon to destroy.
So the process is simple. The Marxists set a policy. It might be socialisation of student loans, or green jobs, or cap and trade, or card check, or a New START treaty with Russia, or Obamacare, or immigration amnesty. They're behind the campaign to end fracking. They're behind the gutting of your military. They're behind the dumbing down of your schools and Common Core. All of these programs that are affecting every American every day is being orchestrated by small Marxist groups who have been able to take over the labour movement of this country, and by doing that they then took over the Democratic Party and are now running the country. They're effectively running the country.
I contend that sooner or later they will use violence. They'll use violence when they get to a certain percentage. If they can get 70% of the people behind them, they will wipe out their opposition, because the socialist communists cannot stand competition.
They have to take America down, then they can have world government, and the communists will then throw off their mask and they will have worldwide Leninism. That is their plan.